It's not uncommon for filmmakers to borrow and pay homage to their favorite movies, and Pixar is no different. In fact, Pixar absolutely fills their films with references to other great movies, but they go by so fast that only the biggest movie buffs might catch them all. While it may just be a similar frame or set design, other times it's a straight up shot-for-shot recreation. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button and ring the bell to stay up to date with all of the latest videos from ScreenRant.
That's very funny, Buzz. This is serious!
It's safe to say the absolute best at recreating famous movie scenes in animation are the creators of Toy Story. These movies are packed with scenes stolen from classic films, and none more than Star Wars. When Buzz is first unboxed in Andy's room, he looks around from within the helmet of his spacesuit in the exact way that Darth Vader does when we first meet him in Star Wars: A New Hope. The scene is complete with his trademark ventilated breathing sound and is instantaneously recognizable because of it. Almost immediately after Buzz's intro comes another reference taken from another classic sci-fi film, Total Recall. While Buzz is still convinced that he needs his spacesuit to breathe, Woody attempts to show him that this isn't the case. He pushes the button to release his helmet, and Buzz immediately starts flailing around and gasping for air before realizing that he's actually totally fine. This scene is copied from the moment Arnold Schwarzenegger breathes in Martian air, with a little less eye-popping from Buzz. In Toy Story, there's a reference to Raiders of the Lost Ark that is totally unmistakable. When a globe topples over, Woody watches in horror as Buzz tries desperately to run away from it, before eventually diving out of the way, very similarly to the giant rolling stone Indy must avoid. The opening scene where Indy attempts to steal a priceless artifact and ends up in a maze of booby traps is one of the most famous scenes from any Indiana Jones movie and has been referenced over and over again in different movies and television. Even though Pixar's movies are geared towards a younger audience, the creators know that for kids to see movies, grown-ups have to see them too, so they love to throw in some things just for the parents. Like this reference to Alien, where the most gruesome scene is redone in a hilarious way. While in the arcade, a kid plays a game called Whack-A-Alien, trying to hit an alien monster popping out of the stomach of an astronaut suit. We all know where that came from, and it is definitely not kid-friendly. Toy Story 2 was no less full of stolen scenes, some even more ambitious than the first movie, like the beautiful recreation of Alfred Hitchcock's Vertigo. When Woody has an extremely creepy dream that Andy doesn't want to play with him anymore because of his torn shoulder, he drops Woody in slow motion, who falls through a deck of cards and into nothingness, before waking up with a start. It's a slightly less psychedelic but almost shot-for-shot version of Scotty's Nightmare from Hitchcock's 1958 horror classic. Another classic movie reference in Toy Story 2 that is impossible for any film buff to miss is a recreation of a scene from Stanley Kubrick's 2001: A Space Odyssey. The production design from this masterpiece is so singular and recognizable that it too has been referenced and redone time and time again. So in the opening scene of Toy Story 2, when Buzz is escaping Zurg on an alien planet, he runs through an octagonal hallway that is almost exactly the same as the one from the space station in 2001.
If I told you half the things I've heard about this Jabba the Hutt, you'd probably short-circuit.
In another example of the fact that almost every modern filmmaker has been a little influenced by Star Wars, there's another scene in Toy Story 2 that was taken, this time from 1983's Return of the Jedi. In the same opening sequence of Buzz on the alien planet, he hides against a rock. A small robotic arm extends from a hatch and pokes out, looking around. It comes face to face with Buzz and jumps back, startled, in almost the exact way that it does to C-3PO in the original film. In Toy Story 2, when Buzz actually comes face to face with the evil Zurg, we get one more scene taken from a different Star Wars movie, and possibly the most famous Star Wars scene of them all. After jumping down onto the top of an elevator and battling it out, Buzz and Zurg proceed to recite the "You killed my father, I am your father" scene from The Empire Strikes Back, complete with Buzz yelling a prolonged "No!" up to the sky as the camera pulls away. It's impossible to miss. There are a ton of stolen scenes and references in Toy Story 3, but for the sake of time, we'll include just one. This great one was taken from the original Mission Impossible. In one of the most suspenseful scenes in the movie, we see Tom Cruise being lowered into a hypersensitive chamber in order to download stolen data onto a floppy disk, but is accidentally dropped and left to hover an inch above the ground. Toy Story 3 recreates this exactly, but with Woody being dangled by the string that controls his voice box. Moving on to another Pixar favorite, this time to Monsters, Inc. There's one scene in particular that is a pretty obvious reference to The Right Stuff, and one that has been borrowed before by many other films. The scene where we first meet the squad of monsters on their way to begin their day's scaring, they do a pretty classic slow motion cool guy group walk into the workroom. The original features a group of astronauts as they strut towards their upcoming mission.
You take one more move, mister, Don't you dare!
This scene from Finding Nemo is so on the nose, it's basically a shot-for-shot remake that could be watched side by side in near perfect unison. In Kramer vs. Kramer, when Billy begins acting out and defying his father, he goes to the freezer for a tub of ice cream. In Finding Nemo, the little fish is determined to defy his protective father by touching the butt, or the bottom of the boat on the surface. The dialogue is almost exactly the same, as is the frustration.
You'd better stop right there, fella. I'm warning you. Hey!
It's pretty hard to make a movie with a villainous shark without making at least one reference to Jaws, and Finding Nemo is no exception. While the Pixar shark Bruce is still definitely a bad guy and pretty intimidating, he doesn't hold a candle to the terrifying great white from Steven Spielberg's masterpiece. And while he bears a resemblance, the actual stolen scene comes from The Shining, as Bruce goes ballistic and smashes into the boat where Nemo and Dory are hiding, declaring,
"Here's Brucey!"
in true Jack Nicholson fashion. Alfred Hitchcock's movies are so iconic, it's pretty expected that they will be borrowed from again and again. Another excellent recreation in Finding Nemo comes from The Birds, his beloved horror film about flocks of birds attacking humans. The seagulls are already one of the best parts of Finding Nemo, and the fact that the scene in which Nigel tries to reunite Nemo's father with his son and is chased by a flock of menacing gulls all screaming "mine" looks almost identical to Hitchcock's flocks of terrifying birds makes it even better. The Incredibles is such a great Pixar film on its own, but when you notice the classic movie references embedded within it, it gets even more incredible. An early black and white montage that explains how superheroes have gone out of fashion in the Incredibles universe is nostalgic and sad, but you may not notice that it looks exactly like a scene from Citizen Kane, announcing that Charles Kane has died. From the newspaper articles to the scrolling marquee, it's an excellent homage to one of the greatest movies of all time. Ratatouille is kind of a gross idea out of context, but it's actually a heartwarming and fun Pixar classic. It's almost hard to be mad at the French chefs for not wanting their kitchen to be filled with rats, but that's if we weren't already rooting for them to help. When we first meet the rat Remy, he comes crashing through a window with a stolen cookbook before it freezes frames, which is actually a perfect recreation of how Tuco is introduced in the classic western The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Once we've accepted it's not gross that this Paris kitchen is filled with rats, we grow to love them pretty quickly, and we get one more awesome stolen scene, this time from Rocky. When the rats have taken over the kitchen and are beginning to cook, there's a montage of them getting ready. In a quick shot, we see a rat boxing with a piece of meat in order to tenderize it. This is, of course, one of the most famous scenes from Rocky during his epic training montage.
Hey, I know that guy. It's, Wally.
WALL-E was instantly beloved upon its release because of its heartwarming love story and also because it's a sobering look at humanity's place here on Earth. But it's not without its stolen scenes, and one of the best is an homage to 1982's Blade Runner. When we pan back to see the world of garbage that WALL-E has been sorting, it resembles establishing shots of the world of Blade Runner. Also, the huge projections advertising that people should abandon Earth echo those of the same type in Blade Runner. Cars is another Pixar franchise that is packed to the brim with references to other movies, so much so that we could make a handful of lists just about that. But our favorite is such a classic movie moment that it's instantly noticeable and very fun to watch. In Cars, during the scene where the car Mater drives backwards, he launches high up into the air and flies directly across a giant full moon, exactly like E.T. and Elliot do in E.T. the Extraterrestrial. Another Star Wars reenactment, because Pixar really can't get enough, also appears in WALL-E. When Eve arrives on Earth to scan for biological matter and stumbles across WALL-E, he watches her scan the environment around her using a wide beam of blue light. If you're a Star Wars fan, you know that that light looks exactly the same as the blue light R2-D2 emits to project the hologram message from Leia asking for help from Obi-Wan Kenobi in A New Hope, startling Luke just as much as Eve startles WALL-E. It makes sense that a movie about robots in space would make a couple of references to 2001: A Space Odyssey, as it's so influential it's almost difficult not to. In fact, the entire subplot about Otto references the famous sci-fi classic more than once. To start, he looks just like HAL 9000 and has a very similar personality, or lack thereof. In another scene, when the ship's captain fully stands, Strauss's Thus Spoke Zarathustra plays, which is the very same song used in the opening of 2001 with very similar context.
Are you in need of
Thank
any
you, but I don't
assistance
need any
today?
help.
Ow.
Up is another one of Pixar's heartbreakers with an opening sequence so sadly honest that most of us can't make it through without shedding at least one tear. It's a movie about nostalgia and time going by, which makes the fact that it references some true classics all the more poignant. The first is The Lost World, a 1925 film about prehistoric dinosaurs, which is recreated identically in Up when an old black and white newsreel shows Carl about Paradise Falls, the place that she dreams of living. The second scene recreated in Up is from the original King Kong when we first meet the antagonist Charles F. Muntz. Muntz was a great world traveler in the 1930s who Carl and Ellie revered, and we see him being watched on screen by 9-year-old Carl at the movie theater. Muntz is presenting his latest find, a 13-foot bird skeleton, to an audience of people. This scene is visually exactly the same as the first reveal of King Kong for the 1933 black and white film. Lastly, from Up is one of the most obvious to those of us who loved The Wizard of Oz as children. One of the most iconic shots in movie history comes from that film and is redone here by Pixar. In The Wizard of Oz, Dorothy's house gets blown away to the magical land by a tornado, and we see it swirling in the massive wind tunnel. In Up, it is reimagined when the house is caught in a terrible storm through wind and rain and flashes of lightning. Inside Out is a great movie, not only for the excellent voices and animation, but because it has actually helped children learn to understand their emotions. It also happens to contain one of the best stolen scenes of them all. Towards the end, when two cops take a statement from a cloud woman about how her husband was blown away by joy, she runs past them again before one cop takes action, the other stops it and says, "Forget it, Jake, it's Cloud Town," in an amazing homage to the movie Chinatown starring Jack Nicholson. It's actually pretty impressive that Back to the Future hasn't made it on this list until now, but we couldn't end it without at least one callback to this beloved movie. In Inside Out, as Riley starts to forget about Bing Bong when he and Joy fall into the memory dump, in a near-perfect reference to when Marty McFly is almost written out of existence, Bing Bong looks down at his hand as it begins to disappear. Things would work out a little better for Marty though, while Bing Bong's sacrifice is truly heartbreaking.
Huh, wonder what that means. Oh well, let's go with it.
Well, there they are. 25 times Pixar stole a scene from a classic movie and recreated it in animation. What did you think of this list? Do you think that the classics are better left alone, or did Pixar do them justice? Are there any great ones that we missed? Let us know in the comments down below, and don't forget to subscribe to keep up with everything ScreenRant has to offer. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you at the movies.